All right, so you're moving to Atlanta, Georgia. You know you want to be in the suburbs, but you have no idea which suburb is the best fit for you and your family. As a realtor, I have helped over 100 families relocate to the Atlanta area and pick the perfect suburb for them based on their situation. So today we're going to go through some of my most common scenarios for people relocating here and which neighborhoods tend to be the best fit for those scenarios. So let's get right into it. We've got our map pulled up. You'll remember from my last video, this is the perimeter that surrounds the city of Atlanta, which you see in the red dotted lines. And our first scenario is going to be you need to commute into the city each day and you need good public schools. The main challenge here being there's not a lot of great public school options inside the perimeter. And besides that, a lot of families want to raise their kids in a suburban environment, not a city environment, but their work has to take them into the city each day, and we have terrible traffic. So how can you combine these things? And we're actually going to break this one down by some of the most common places that people are working and which neighborhoods are appropriate for that general location. The first one being Midtown and downtown, which is going to be popular for a lot of people. These are commercial districts, they employ a lot of people. Now, one of the first places that needs to be on your radar, especially if you're working with a larger budget, is going to be East Cobb, which isn't listed in this view of the map, but is right in that area in Cobb County, in between Marietta and Roswell. And as you've heard me say many times in this channel, East Cobb is known for having some of the most competitive and rigorous school curriculums in the entire metro. And although you will definitely have to contend with traffic making this commute during your week, if you're able to be strategic on your timing, you can do this in as little as 30 minutes. In fact, I recently helped one of our city's best meteorologists sell their home in East Cobb that they were living in. They were working at a TV station which was located in Midtown. They had children, one of the great schools in East Cobb, and he would make this commute frequently throughout the week and was able to keep it around 30 minutes. And when their kids grew up, they were ready to downsize. We helped them sell that house and move closer in the city. But I would say if you work anywhere in this general side of town in the city, East Cobb and Marietta are going to be great options for you to look at because this generally is going to be a very doable commute, much more so for you than say coming directly from the north from an Alpharetta or coming from the northeast and a Lawrenceville, which are both great places to live, but unfortunately your commute is going to be much longer than the one we're now talking about. Another very common area for employment for my clients is going to be this area, Decatur, North Decatur. This is where the CDC and multiple Emory campuses are. So we get a lot of clients that are relocating to work at one of those two. So, you know, this is very much in the perimeter, but they've got a family, they need good public schools, and they want to be in the suburbs generally. Now, city of Decatur itself is fantastic. They're great public schools, and it has some of the best walkable areas in the entire metro. However, it's very expensive, and it definitely has more of a city living feel. So if you're going for that suburban environment, it probably won't be the best fit. So one neighborhood that I like to mention to my clients that is really not talked about a lot when you look up some of the best suburbs around Atlanta is going to be Lilburn, which again, you can't see on the map, but is going to be right about there. Now, Lilburn is kind of a sleepy, diverse suburb on the northeast side of town. It has solidly rated schools. We're in Gwinnett County, so you're gonna get a fantastic parks system, and you're gonna get some fantastic diversity in this area as well. And although the traffic in Gwinnett has a very bad reputation, this commute in particular really, I think, is totally doable for someone going into the office multiple days a week. And your dollar is gonna go much further in a Lilburn than a city of Decatur, certainly. But really, of all the suburbs that we're gonna talk about today that have what people are looking for in a good suburbs, the schools, the safety, the good family-friendly environment, value-wise, Lilburn is probably gonna be at the top of the list. You're gonna get the most amount of house per dollar looking in an area like this. Now, one more recommendation for this scenario would be the Scottdale, Avondale Estates area, which again, you've probably heard me talk about quite a bit on this channel. Now, admittedly, this is going to have a little bit more of a city feel. However, I lived in Scottdale for a while and it felt like I was much further away from the city than I actually was. The reason I like to mention these areas, Scottdale in particular, is because You're so close to the areas we're talking about where the CDC and Emory are, but you're just flat out super close to City of Decatur, which has fantastic amenities. So you're gonna be able to enjoy fantastic restaurants, really good walkability, good retail shopping, and a great environment, really within 10 minutes living in Avondale Estates or Scottdale. Avondale has a great, unique vibe to it. They're really building out their downtown area, and it's got some really unique character, both in the little shops that you're gonna see along College Ave, and also in the architecture. Some of the most beautiful homes I've seen around Atlanta are in this area. Avondale is extremely expensive in its own right, but it is a bit of a step down from Decatur, and I do tend to see more budget-friendly options in this part of town. So if you're doing this commute and you kind of want to be in the city, but not really, I would highly recommend you look at this area. Our last scenario for needing to commute into the city is going to be considering the airport, Hartsfield-Jackson, which is in College Park, and this employs a lot of people. So this is gonna be relevant for you if you work in an airline related industry, but also if you just travel a lot for work, obviously you're gonna wanna consider where the major airport is. So we're on the south side of town, so obviously it's not going to make a lot of sense coming from the north in either direction, although I'd make a small note that typically coming from the Cobb side to the airport is gonna be much easier than coming from the Gwinnett side. But this is a great opportunity to highlight neighborhoods south of the perimeter, which don't get talked about enough. Areas like Fayetteville and Peachtree City, which are essentially right next to each other. These are awesome suburbs of Atlanta that have great public school systems. They're safe, have a nice family-friendly environment. And if you're working at the airport or travel a lot, that's going to be very convenient for you. Now, it's important to note this is going to be a very different lifestyle day to day than living in some of the suburbs that we've talked about and will talk about to the north side of town. This is typically going to have a little bit more of a country feel. It's going to maybe have a more slow moving feel. And to be honest, there are fantastic high quality amenities in and around these areas. However, just in terms of quantity, you're probably not gonna have quite as many options as you would being in an area like Alpharetta, which we'll talk about later. However, this is a scenario where if you are a foodie and you like to do a date night, you can go all the way up to Midtown, and depending on how strategic you are, you can do it in under 45 minutes. So very doable for a date night. Peachtree City is known as a golf cart community, which the people down there love. Everyone owns a golf cart. That's the main way that they get around. So this is an area where potentially you don't need to use your car nearly as much as you would living in any other area. Now, Peachtree City can get quite expensive. However, again, comparatively, I think it's good value to most of the typical northern suburbs. But I have to say Fayetteville in particular is one of the biggest hidden gems in terms of suburbs around Metro Atlanta. I think there's good value. It's a great family-friendly atmosphere. Again, good schools, safe, great proximity to the city. If you're okay with a slightly slower pace or more of a country rural feel sounds good to you, then I would definitely look into this area, in particular Fayetteville and Peachtree City. So let's just go ahead and review. If you are working in the downtown Midtown area, we're probably gonna wanna start by looking at East Cobb. If we are working at Emory or CDC, I would definitely take a look at Lilburn or Scottdale / Avondale. And if you are working on anything related to the airport or you travel frequently, I'm gonna recommend you take a look at Fayetteville or Peachtree City. All right, scenario number 2, you do need good schools, but you're really not concerned with how far from the city of Atlanta you are. So basically you wanna know what are just flat out some of the best suburbs in all of Metro Atlanta without having to consider a commute. And typically these are higher budget buyers, so we are gonna look at some more expensive options, but we'll look at some more affordable ones here in a minute. So these suburbs are the ones that you've probably seen quite frequently on top 10 lists if you've been doing research about suburbs in Metro Atlanta. Obviously, Alpharetta is going to be probably the most popular and talked about suburb in Metro Atlanta, just in terms of quantity and quality of things to do within that neighborhood itself. There's really no rival to it. You've got a fantastic downtown in Alpharetta with lots of high quality shopping and things to do. But you've also got Avalon, which is another massive mixed use development with a movie theater and more shopping and things to do and public spaces for people to congregate. But you've also got the Alpha Loop being developed in Alpharetta, which links these two. So kind of like their version of the Beltline, which we talked about in our last video, but they're really creating some walkability and some connection to these very popular areas in Alpharetta. And outside of that, just geographically, I think it sits in a very ideal area for people who, again, we're not worried about the city as much, but realistically, we're not that far. So your drive into the city is going to usually be around 45 minutes, depending exactly what we're talking about. But you certainly don't have to travel into the city for high quality amenities like you would have to do in other areas. You can get everything you need in Alpharetta itself. And in addition to being reasonably close to the city, you've got a head start on North Georgia and all the great nature up there. Blue Ridge, Lake Lanier is close by. There are vineyards and great hiking spots and great kayaking spots and great camping spots all around North Georgia. So if you were gonna pick one spot to enjoy really some of the best things that the state has to offer, Alpharetta is probably, just purely geographically, one of the best spots to do so. Now, because of that, it's an expensive area to live in. If you do need a single family detached home with at least 3 beds, 2 bathrooms, your starting price is probably gonna be around $650,000 for something that's move-in ready, but honestly not updated. Obviously, this can go well into the millions depending on the size, finishes, and proximity to downtown. But the bottom line is the love for Alpharetta that you read about online for the most part is warranted. And if you're working with a large budget and you want a great suburban atmosphere with lots of things to do, you've got the city if you really need it. It's convenient. You can enjoy all of North Georgia. Alpharetta is probably the first place you should look. Now, for a slightly more country feel to the north, for a fantastic downtown, in fact, considered one of the best downtowns of all the suburbs in Metro Atlanta, you're gonna wanna look at Woodstock to the northwest. This area has exploded in growth in the last 10 years. And overall, it's a beautiful, quaint suburb. Again, good schools, good safety, and plenty of things to do in and around the area itself. You've also got fantastic proximity to Lake Allatoona, which doesn't get the shine that Lanier does, but is a legitimate amenity to consider, especially if you enjoy lake days, being on the water, or if you have a boat. Of course, this will be an area where you can certainly enjoy all that Alpharetta has to offer. If you're a baseball fan and you wanna catch a Braves game, really not gonna be too bad for you to do. And again, I know we're not as concerned with the city as we were in our last scenario, but if you do wanna go into town for whatever reason, that should be within an hour in most scenarios. Woodstock has gotten quite a bit more expensive over the last few years, but your dollar's definitely gonna go further here than in an Alpharetta. Again, using the standard, because it's the most popular, single family detached home that's at least a 3-2 and move in ready, you're gonna want a budget starting at least $500,000, but at that base price, again, your finishes are gonna be dated. Once you get into the mid 600, you're gonna start to see some larger home options with higher quality finishes. So we talked about a great option in Fulton/Forsyth and Alpharetta, Cherokee County and Woodstock. What about Gwinnett County? One of the most family-oriented suburbs around Metro Atlanta that I love talking about is Sewanee. And Sewanee has a lot going for it, all right? We already talked about how Gwinnett County has a robust park system and fantastic diversity to offer. It has a really nice downtown area that continues to grow around, a big green space. There's an amphitheater and, splash pads. Just, there's always kids out playing, families out in and around downtown Sewanee. And we are in North Gwinnett, so as you head north in Gwinnett, the quality of those public schools tends to go up, up, and up. So you're gonna get really good educational offerings here. Plus, you've got some great proximity to some fantastic food in Duluth. If you like Asian food, that's a legitimate thing to consider. You've got a very popular amenity close by in Lake Lanier, which I know it's the subject of controversy and ghost stories and all kinds of crazy lore. The reality is it's a very popular amenity for people living in Metro Atlanta, especially in the warmer months. So it's something that you should be aware of and take advantage of, unless you're scared. And on top of all that, honestly, coming into the city, although, doing it every day, depending on where you are, would be, painful to some degree. If you're just going there on a weekend day because you want to hang out for the day in the city with the family, that's going to be a very doable trip into the city, usually less than 50 minutes, so the city's really not that far away. In terms of value, I'd probably place it in between Woodstock and Alpharetta. Like everywhere else in Metro Atlanta, it's gotten quite a bit more expensive over the last few years. So you're gonna wanna plan to have a budget at least in the mid 500s if you're looking for that single family detached 3-2. However, keep in mind when I'm, giving you a rough estimate of what a detached 3-2 would cost in these areas, there are always going to be cheaper attached options. If you're okay with condo or townhome living in all of the areas we're talking about today, you can damn near cut the cost in half, depending on how much space you need. But in all three of these suburbs I've talked about so far, you can find a livable townhome in the $300,000 range, and usually even in the high $200,000 range, again, depending on how new the building is and how much space we're talking about. So I don't want you to have the impression that you need that budget I'm mentioning to live there. I'm just touching on what the most popular product, so to speak, is for families looking in these areas. And my last recommendation in this category, someone who's looking for good schools, a nice suburban environment for their kids to grow up in, they're not as concerned with how far they are from the city, is going to be McDonough to the south. So that is right here. Now, I want to mention McDonough because number one, it doesn't get mentioned a lot. Number two, I'm really trying to highlight neighborhoods in all directions around the city of Atlanta. But also, of the four options we're talking about for this category, you're gonna get the most value in McDonough. Your dollar's gonna go way further here than the other three neighborhoods we just covered. You're gonna be able to find that starter home detached single family option beginning in the low to mid $400,000 range. And McDonough's come a long, long way over the last 15 years. It has a really nice little quaint downtown area with some good shopping, retail things to do. The area itself is going to have a slightly more country, suburban feel, like many of the other areas we've talked about south of Atlanta. And of course, being on this side of town is going to be much more convenient for you to get to the airport if you do like to travel a lot or work in an airline related industry. And although it's not an area I would recommend for a daily commute, especially up into Midtown or Buckhead, the city, again, is not super far away, so you will be able to take advantage of all that it has to offer, even though you're in a slightly more rural suburban atmosphere. So to recap, if you have a large budget and you just want the most amount of things to do at your fingertips, you're gonna wanna consider Alpharetta. If you want a fantastic suburb with one of the best downtowns in Metro Atlanta, but are maybe slightly priced out of Alpharetta, you should take a look at Woodstock. If Gwinnett County appeals to you for any number of reasons which I've mentioned previously, I would recommend you taking a look at Sewanee. And if you're working maybe with a slightly lower budget and you like the idea of a more country feel in your suburb, I would recommend taking a look at McDonough. Scenario number 3, you want to be close to the city, but you're not as concerned with the quality of the public schools. This is a common scenario for my younger clients, a single person or a young couple. They don't have kids and they're usually working with a lower budget. Maybe they're priced out of the really popular inner city neighborhoods, or maybe they just want really convenient access to the city without actually living in the city. Or maybe they just need a larger home and they're working with a slightly lower budget, and so they can't really afford to buy that big home inside the perimeter. So the first place I want to talk about, which I talk about quite a bit, is going to be Mableton. This is in Cobb County. Now, there's not a ton going on in Mableton. However, it is growing quite rapidly. But purely in terms of zipping in and out of the city very conveniently without breaking the bank for the place that you're living, Mableton is going to be extremely convenient. Of course, there's traffic everywhere, but the flow of traffic, this is not one of the major streams of traffic that we see. We typically see that worst kind of flow north-south or coming from Gwinnett, but heading into town either from the west or east of the city tends to be less treacherous. Your dollar is certainly gonna go much further here than many of the other areas we've talked about so far. If you're looking for that single family detached home, if you've got a budget in the low $400,000 range, we should certainly be able to find you that single family detached home. And it should be definitely larger than what you'd see on average at the same price for the other areas that we've mentioned. Again, there's not a ton of high quality amenities immediately in Mableton. However, Six Flags is pretty close. I think that's an amenity worth talking about. If you want to enjoy Truist Park in Smyrna or downtown Marietta, that's gonna be very easy to do. And the whole point was that it's close to the city. So you're gonna have the entire city at your fingertips, basically. Now, if you're looking for a larger parcel, maybe you just want some land. And I get quite a few clients that are looking for this for one reason or another. They just want a half-acre plus piece of property, but they don't wanna be out in the middle of nowhere, Georgia. They wanna be a decent distance from the city. I think it's worth taking a look at Douglasville. I have personal friends that I've helped purchase here and they absolutely love it. This is an area where, it does have lower income, higher crime sections, but it's also an area where rich people build huge houses for way less than they would need to in more desirable parts of the metro. This is an area where getting an acre plus of land is actually doable under $600,000, which is usually not the case in an area so close to the city. This is an area where you could potentially get 1+ acres of land with your property for under $500,000 potentially. Again, gonna be highly variable depending on the quality of the house that's sitting on that property. But I love the convenience to 20 heading right into town. It's gonna have a lot of similar benefits as Mableton does. You're gonna be able to enjoy Marietta, Truist, and the airport is going to be extremely convenient for you there. So to me, this is a solid option if you want a bit of land, you're working with a lower budget, and you want the city close by. Now, for many of my clients, new construction is actually very important. And if you're working with a budget under $500,000, it can be difficult to find something that's not extremely far from the city. If that is you, I would recommend you consider Palmetto/Tyrone. This is an area where a lot of new construction communities are being developed at affordable prices. You can see just how close it is to the airport and the city of Atlanta. So if you are needing to commute into the city, it's going to be very doable even every day from this area. And this is a quiet, typically very safe area. Now, there's not going to be a lot of amazing things to do in and around the area itself, but that's going to be the trade-off you have for getting something that's new construction or like new in this area for a budget under $500,000, even under $400,000, depending on if you're open to a townhome or a smaller option. But if new construction is important to you and you're on a budget, I think you need to look in this part of town. And finally, if you want to be really, really close to the city on a really low budget and you're not as concerned with the schools, I would definitely take a look at Stone Mountain. There's a lot of conflicting information about Stone Mountain, the park and the neighborhood itself. But the reality is, first of all, Stone Mountain Park is a very popular amenity for people living in the metro. Whether you're hiking, walking, doing a picnic, whether you're enjoying Snow Mountain in the winter months, it's a legitimate amenity to be close by to. Now, the town of Stone Mountain can offer a very different living experience from areas that are not too far from one another. I go through subdivisions and neighborhoods in Stone Mountain that look idyllic, with kids out playing, clearly family-friendly areas that don't raise any concerns at all. And there are lower income, higher crime areas of Stone Mountain where, unfortunately, where the homes are not as well maintained, and certain parts of it in general can look sketchy, but I would not cross it off the list. As we talk about quite often, can't judge an entire neighborhood as safe or not safe. Things change rapidly in small distances, certainly in the city, but also certainly in Stone Mountain. But you can see just how close it is to Atlanta. I mean, you're just outside the perimeter. The city's gonna be at your fingertips. City of Decatur is going to be at your fingertips. You're really not going to be far from anything, whether it's the airport or all the great shopping in Buckhead. And you can purchase a home here really cheaply comparatively. Even with a budget in the high $300,000 to low $400,000 range, you can get a move-in ready, single-family detached home, 3-2 or more, in an area that you should feel safe with you and your partner living. You are gonna wanna be diligent in the immediate surrounding area of any home you're looking at potentially buying in Stone Mountain. But this is also an area with a lot of commercial development going on, specifically related to warehouse spaces, which is really relevant only to say that I think this area is gonna continue to grow very rapidly, and I think the value here is gonna go through the roof in terms of buying now and your resale value 5, 10, 15 years from now. I think Stone Mountain is gonna have some of the sharpest appreciation of any of the neighborhoods we're talking about today. So to recap, Mableton and Stone Mountain for an extremely easy trip into the city at a great budget. Douglasville for a larger parcel, and Palmetto / Tyrone if you really want to get that new construction single family home or townhome, but you don't have an outsized budget. All right, last but not least, this video's gone on way too long, but hopefully you're getting some value out of it. I wanted to talk about just flat out my personal favorites, right? I've lived here since 2008. Where would Mark move if he was going to live in the suburbs? So for me personally, there are two main suburbs that I would consider moving to and purchasing a home in if, you know, I wanted an area with good schools, good proximity to the city, and a great atmosphere with high quality things to do, or just if I wanted to be in the suburbs all by myself and I didn't care about the schools and I didn't care about the proximity to the city. I'm just gonna cut right to the chase. If Mark's moving to the suburbs, he's moving to Duluth, okay? If you've watched my channel for a while, I feel like you know me by now, you know I love Asian food. I love authentic, cheap eats, which can be found, you know, all along Buford Highway leading up to Duluth. But Duluth is a fantastic suburb and highly underrated in my opinion. You know, yes, it's got a large Asian population, and because of that, you are just gonna have endless options for great food that's not the retail chains that you typically see. You're also gonna have some of the best Asian markets and food courts in this area. So in terms of just a food scene, if food is important to you, you're a foodie, you like to eat out a lot, I can't think of a better suburb than Duluth. But also I spent some time recently in downtown Duluth and I was blown away at how far it's come. It's a gorgeous downtown area with lots of things to do, really decent walkability. I thought it was a great atmosphere. The city itself, not that far away. You could do it in as little as 30, 35 minutes. Of course, during rush hour, that's gonna shoot way up, but not far from the city, not far from Lake Lanier, head start to North Georgia, Gwinnett County, so we've got typically good public schools, great diversity, great park system, and you're surrounded by other amazing neighborhoods, which of course we talked about today. Sewanee, Johns Creek, Alpharetta, even Lawrenceville. These are all great areas that have different things to offer reasonably close by. Am I gonna go on a date night to Lawrenceville if I live in Duluth? Probably not, but I still think it's worth mentioning. I mean, certainly Alpharetta being close by is something to consider in terms of the amount of things you'll have to do. And amazingly enough, your value in Duluth, I think, is still pretty good. High 400s for that single family detached might be stretching it depending on how move-in ready you need it to be, but certainly in the low 500s, you should start to see some really solid options. And if you're single or you're a young couple without kids, or you're just on a lower budget for whatever reason, and you're open to townhomes or condos, there are a lot of great, affordable, relatively new attached options at much lower price points in Duluth. So you wanna know Mark's favorite, it's Duluth. I am gonna mention one more because I do really like this suburb specifically for the vibe related to the nature that is in and around this area and the great access and proximity to the Chattahoochee, which is, although it's not a clean river, it is a really great amenity to have close by, and it creates a really nice atmosphere to live in a town so close to it. And of course, I'm talking about Roswell. You can see the hooch, going through Roswell. So when you visit downtown Roswell, a good portion of it is built up around or very close to the Chattahoochee National Recreation Center. If you drive through here, you'll see people walking along the river, fishing, having a picnic. It's a very pretty atmosphere, very green area, like of course is the case for many other areas around Atlanta. And personally, I find downtown Roswell to be one of the better downtowns in Metro Atlanta. It's quaint, it's got a nice cozy feel. I like some of the restaurants that are in this area. There are quite a few outdoor outfitters in Roswell. And so this does seem to be a great family-friendly suburbs for people in particular that appreciate the outdoors. Now, I always strive to be super honest, so you should know 2 quick downsides about Roswell. Number 1, just simply one of the most crazy traffic areas in all the metro, in Roswell itself, but also, if you're doing the commute either way, it's going to be really bad. So that may be a deal breaker for you, but this is right in the danger zone traffic-wise. The other one would just be, I can't say I'm a huge fan of the architecture of those homes in this area. First of all, a lot of them, for whatever reason, have not been updated since they were built in the 80s or the 70s or even the 60s. So, that's usually because you have a long-term occupant, which can be good. The homes, I will say, are usually maintained very well, but they are not updated. So a lot of times for my clients, it can feel like they're at a price point where they should be getting something that's updated, but it's got those vanities that were put in the 80s. And also, lower ceilings typically in homes in Roswell. It's not always the case. But without describing it in overwhelming detail, I'm not typically a huge fan of the style of home that you'll see in Roswell, but certainly there are some great options, especially for homeowners who have taken the time to update their home over the years. So, Mark's picks. Number 1, my personal favorite is Duluth, and number 2 would be Roswell. Those are the suburbs that I would live in if I was moving to the suburbs, which I'm not. So that's it, y'all. Recommendations for my most common clients that went on longer than I thought it would. As usual, I really hope this provided you value. I would love to interact with you more, so please comment below what will provide you value. What do you want to know? What topics, subjects, questions, concerns do you have? I need ideas for ways to provide you guys value. Please like and subscribe. It's a free way to support me in this channel. And as always, this is what I do. I'm a realtor who specializes in helping people relocate to the Atlanta area and really help find the best neighborhood for you and your family. I think myself and my team have developed a really keen ability to listen to what someone's priorities are, what their limitations are in terms of budget or anything else, and come up with options that really align with those priorities. I think we have a great track record of happy families and couples. So you can book a Zoom call with me using the link in the description below. My phone number's down there, my email's down there. Please reach out. There's no obligation, but I absolutely love it when my viewers become clients and friends. So thank you so much, as always, for watching, and I'll see you next time.